I see you over there getting ready for Daytona, Talladega, or God forbid iRacing Super Speedway, and we all know the big one's going to happen at some point, but what can you even do to avoid it? Well, today I'll go over some strategies and techniques that will hopefully help minimize the chances of you ending up in the big one. I don't have many wreck avoidance clips readily available, so shout out to my friend Justin, aka JustinBo20 on Twitch, for allowing me to use some of his clips to help show some examples. Alright, let's get right to it.
I got second! I got second!
Still there.
This is gonna be a wreck. Here it is. Told you.
Clear outside. Inside. Go high. Yellow flag is out. Line up single file.
So this clip may be in the super late models at Bristol, but there is a lot to do about wreck avoidance here that can be carried over into super speedways or really any other type of racing. So first off, I want you to see what he says before this, and I know this is slow-mo so you can't hear it, but you can see here he is saying there's going to be a wreck. And being able to tell the future is basically the #1 way to avoid wrecks. And I know, right? Telling the future, easy. Well, he sees some telltale signs here, which may be a little bit different from Bristol than in Talladega, but we'll go over what those telltale signs are in a little bit here. So the telltale signs for this specific wreck is that he sees that this car is staying by the wall while this car is trying to move under him to make a 3-wide middle. Well, this doesn't work out very often because that third car has no clue that he's going to do this. So the third car all the way on the bottom is going to come all the way up as if they were only 2 wide, and that's going to create a crunch. And when they create a crunch 3 wide, that's how the wreck happens. So you can see here, he sees that the cars are crunching and he gets his he doesn't go full throttle. He's backing off a little bit. He has some room behind him, so he's backing off. So because he's able to see the danger, he's able to put himself in a less aggressive position. And now, because he has heightened awareness that there probably is going to be a wreck, he reacts extremely quick to the contact in the wreck itself. If he was just snoozing, just driving his own race, it would take him probably double the amount of time to react here. So you can see he's on the brake before they're really even wrecking. Like he sees one car get kind of sideways. See, look, he starts on the brake here, and the only thing he is seeing is this car slightly sideways. So that is huge. He's able to react to the wreck before what seemingly is humanly possible, but that is because he sensed the danger and is able to get on the brakes really early. So now, when he sees them wrecking, he has to do a lot of things. He could choose to full brake, but he sees that too many cars are just starting to pile into it and he might just become part of it. So he keeps his eye on the gap. But this gap is a little bit deceiving because this is Bristol, and Bristol is a lot like super speedways in that there is a lot of lateral movement during a wreck. And what do I mean by lateral movement? Well, we'll see here, this 7 car, he starts up high, and now he's going to come back across the track, and that is the #1 danger for any of these wrecks in terms of wreck avoidance. So what he does here is he keeps his eye on the gap and aims for it until he sees this car right here start to come down the track. And now suddenly, what does he have to miss? Well, he has 2 stationary cars down here. You don't have to worry about the stationary cars because they're either holding their brakes or they're crashing in a way that they aren't changing their line. And then they have one more car up here who seems to have gotten stuck in the wall in some sort of way. Sometimes they would bounce back across the track, but it seems like in his case that didn't really happen. So now he is faced with just avoiding this single car coming down the track. And when you take the other cars out of the equation, that's not that bad. How do you avoid a single car coming down the track? Well, all you gotta do is kind of just aim where he is a little bit, because with the rate that he is moving down the track, one place you know that he isn't going to be by the time you get there is exactly where he is right now. So he aims essentially directly towards him. And now he's left with one more danger, and that is this single car in the middle here. The car kind of is spinning, but also keeping the line just by the way that he's spinning. It seemed like he tried to think that he was going by the wall at first. But now he sees a problem. Now, he's already pretty slow. You can see at this point he is on the brakes. In all honesty, he probably should have been on the brakes the whole time. You see he had a little moment where he was gassing it up through it. That probably made this a little more difficult than it needed to be. especially with cautions on, you can just get all the spots that you're going to lose back. I think what he did was he saw this gap and he's like, I gotta gun it to get through this gap, which is sometimes an option. But when he sees that hole close up, now the only thing left to do is get on the brakes. So you kind of cover both your bases if you get on the brakes early, with the only danger of one of these cars, let's say this car, getting in the wreck and then coming back up the track. That's what we're trying to avoid when we gun through a wreck as opposed to getting on the brakes. Because sometimes you can be completely stopped, but everyone around you is still gonna wreck. So that's pretty huge too. But he was able to get enough slowdown on the brakes here, and you notice he only goes to 50% brake. What he's trying to do here is that when you are braking for a wreck, you want to be on the brakes as much as possible without locking up the brakes, because you lose all side-to-side ability and turn ability when you are locking up the brakes, and you don't even slow down as well. So he is about as much brakes as he can get, kind of pumping the brakes a bit, and then he's trying to see, okay, I got this car still up here on my left side, but I'm still not slow enough to where I can stop before this car. So there's only one option left. He's going to take the gamble that this car is going to come back up towards the wall and that he can shoot below him. There's not really any other thing to do here. So he's put himself into a spot where he has to pick a spot and commit to it. And luckily for him, that happens. He sees that now he has a gap. He has to worry about whoever's on his blind side right now, but they should have enough room to make it work. And he makes it through and almost gets run over by an ARCA breaker. But that's how it goes sometimes. And then one last thing about that ARCA breaker is that once you get through a wreck, your job is not done. So yes, you have to be looking out your windshield this whole time to make it through the wreck, but you almost have to have a little bit of a sense of what's going on in your mirror as well. Sometimes something is going on in your mirror where you have to react to it just as much as you have to react to what's going on in your windshield. So you see here, he clogs up a lane that the ARCA breaker is shooting towards. And you can see in the back of his eye, the ARCA breaker's coming, and he goes a little bit up the track at the last second, and they all narrowly avoid each other. So even though this is a Bristol wreck, it really has everything, but it all starts with being able to sense danger ahead of time so that you can react as quick as possible and put yourself in the best position possible.
Watch out. There we go.
Caution.
I'm working. Oh my.
Save your stuff, save a little fuel.
So with the follow-up for that last clip, we were back at Talladega, but instead of praising J-Bo, we might expose him a little bit here. So what happened with this clip is the same exact thing, where he sees this wreck happen before really anything else. He was ready for the wreck because he saw some movement in the lines that you don't normally see when everyone's just racing normally. So things to look out for at Talladega is people in the line starting to jostle around slightly back and forth. When there's jostling the line, that usually means that there's more pushing going on, people are getting a little more crunched together, and it's more likely for a wreck to happen. And then again, when you see that tire smoke, that's basically all you need to know. But he had that idea before he even saw the tire smoke because of all of the shifting and jostling around in the line. You see mainly this car right here getting on the apron. When you see a car kind of get on the apron, that's when you know to have a heightened alert. Really rarely do wrecks happen from perfectly formed lines, everyone racing calmly. Usually the wrecks happen when somebody gets aggressive or things get hairy. So the majority of the time you can spot a wreck just by noticing the dynamics of the pack. And so again, he was able to react to it really quickly, except he did a couple things that are good and then one thing that is bad. So the couple things that are good is that when you're riding around at the back at Talladega, a lot of people make the mistake of just getting on the brakes immediately. Now it's super easy to get on the brakes immediately and just think, okay, all my danger is up here and I'm okay. But it is no guarantee that these people in your mirror have any visuals. So if you get on the brakes really, really early to avoid a wreck in the lead pack, you could just get run over. So the best thing to do, first off, is to make sure that you're in a different lane than all the cars behind you so that you all don't run into each other. And he does that. He gets on the apron. I really like getting on the apron at Talladega because there's just so much real estate down here. Yeah, some cars will wreck down here, but just as many cars will wreck up on the racing surface, and that's where the majority of people will be. So I like being on the bottom lane here and coming down into the apron area. But what happens is he's still not on the brakes yet. He gasses it up even when he gets on the apron. So what needed to happen was I needed to get on the brakes earlier. And then one more thing that we talked about earlier was he got too much on the brakes. You see here, full brakes. He's locking them up. And when you're locking up the brakes and you have a car right in front of you, you can't turn anywhere. So even though he's full on the brakes, he can't turn. And suddenly he's hitting the car in front of him. And a little bit embarrassing, but also a very funny clip. But a lot of things done well here and just a couple things done wrong. So that's the Talladega follow-up on that Martinsville wreck.
Oh, they're doing all the wrecking.
In and out. One inside only. Caution, caution.
This wreck here will teach us a bit about the importance of positioning and then also the dynamics of what happens in a wreck when it happens in the middle of a banked corner. So first off here, we can see that J-Bo has put himself third in the outside line. I like to call this a big danger zone. I think that the first couple rows are about the best place to be, and anywhere behind that you're in the splash zone. So in the first row or two, you can really be in front of most of the wrecks and control the race. And yes, wrecks do happen from the lead, but they're not nearly as often as ones that happen from cars coming together and crunching in the middle of the pack, or at least in the third row on back. So he finds himself third or fourth on the outside line here, and this is why I don't like the outside. Because they start wrecking on the outside, and suddenly, there's just nowhere to go. There's no holes, no nothing. Basically, the only option J-Bo has here once he sees that they wreck is to avoid this car at all costs and then hope the entire line of cars on the bottom all accommodate room for him. So oppose that to all these cars on the bottom who see this wreck happen up top and say, okay, I can kind of either hold my line or just let off and go down to all this room on the apron. They have all the room on the apron to escape the wreck, whereas being on the top, your only option is to go to the single lane where you have room and then hope everyone else accommodates you. And in the chaos of a wreck, that's not always going to happen. But luckily for him, he goes down that lane and there is just barely enough room to make it work. Now, would it have been better if this car was on the bottom of the apron like this car behind them is? Of course, that would have been a lot more comfortable for everyone. But they make it through. So now let's talk about the dynamics of a wreck. So at the very beginning of the wreck, you will notice that the wreck starts up top. You can see here, the beginning of the wreck, cars are up top. And why is this usually the case? Well, it's because the cars are still traveling at a high rate of speed and they're in a corner. So centripetal force, the majority of the cars are just going to go up the track. But after they wreck, they lose all of that momentum. And then suddenly they're up on the top of a hill with no momentum, so they'll just roll back down. So you have to know what part of the wreck you are approaching. Are you approaching the beginning of the wave or the end of the wave? So in J-Bo's case, he knows that he's in the beginning of the wave, where all the cars are gonna trend backwards to the top, no matter where their car is pointed. Because this 72 here, he could not drive down the track even if he wanted to, because he doesn't have any traction, he's spinning out, and his momentum is still taking him towards the wall. So that means the only place that he can go is down the track. But if he was in the farther back in the pack, way back in his mirror, when these cars have lost their momentum, then they would want to go to the top of the track, even if they see those cars kind of sticking up towards the wall, because they can only stay up the wall by the wall for so long. They're going to have to roll down eventually, or the wreck is going to migrate down the hill eventually. And then you see, just like I said, behind, there's a big wreck behind them because the cars lost their momentum and came back down the hill. So some of those cars who were in the middle of the pack, who were at the bottom, now are caught in no man's land because the wreck came to them. So at the same time, if you were riding around in the back, or at least at the back of the front pack, being in the top is actually a better place to be, because by the time you get to the wreck, the majority of the cars will be coming back down the track. And lastly, sometimes you're just lucky. Thanks for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you all on the track.